Hello everyone, Twin Skiing Lifts and Rides here. This video is going to be very different. It is not going to be a POV video, and it's not going to be a compilation. This is going to be an analysis video about the Park City Planning Commission's decision to block what Vail Resorts sees as a significant investment to the resort experience. For those of you that don't know, back in September 2021, Vail Resorts announced an epic lift upgrade of 21 new lifts at 14 different resorts designed to minimize wait times and better enhance the ski experience. This was a big boom for Vail Resorts since last year COVID hit the resorts hard, which meant a lack of staff and not enough terrain open to spread out the crowds. The new lift boom was sure to be a big hit. Unfortunately, one project, the Park City project, was shut down by a group of neighbors and the town, meaning that the new lifts won't be built by the 2022-23 season. This is what today's video is about. First, I want to talk about the proposed upgrades themselves. Park City Mountain Resort planned to replace the Eagle lift with a new high-speed 6, with the mid-station near the top of Three Kings, ending around where King Khan is. The second lift is a complete replacement of Silverlode Express with a new D-Line High-Speed 8, the first High-Speed 8 in North America for Vail Resorts. Both of those lifts are in areas that see high traffic, particularly Silverlode, as Silverlode's the major form of egress from miners camp. Already, nothing wrong so far. Upgrade 2 high traffic areas for better crowd flow and less time waiting in line. Now, let's look at what went wrong. Park City Mountain Resort has a development agreement from 1998 that allows them to make upgrades through an administrative conditional use permit as long as they are consistent with the master plan and meet 6 criteria. Here's the problem. The resort announced the upgrades, but didn't take into account what the locals wanted, which is why a group of 4 residents appealed the projects after the ski season ended. According to the opponents, there were 2 flaws. First, unlike the King Khan and Motherlode upgrades, which were consistent with the master plan and fit the parameters, the new lifts were outside the parameters of the development agreement, especially for the Eagle lift, which was in no ways consistent with the master plan. Second, another condition, adequate parking mitigation, was also not met. There were also flaws with the added capacity, which ultimately led to the Park City Planning Commission to uphold the appeal. If I'm missing something, just let me know in the comments. So, with all that, what do the locals and the Planning Commission want? Well, the locals say they want a more sufficient parking plan instead of the paid parking plan, especially considering that the parking lots overflowed for at least 68 days during the season. They also want to make sure that the resort operates under the parameters of the master agreement plan and that the city does what it takes to ensure a smooth and comfortable experience for skiers, even if it means capping the number of skiers per day. The commission says that if the resort wants to build lifts outside the master plan, they should bring it through the commission for thorough evaluation. Now, let's look at Park City's side of the story. See, the resort generates their revenue from people coming to ski, and they use some of that money for not only upgrades to the resort, but also taxes for the city to invest in roads, residences, schools, etc. When the city blocks the lift projects that would further improve the ski experience, this means the resort would generate less revenue since fewer people would ski at Park City this season. This means less taxes for the city and unsatisfied locals and out-of-state tourists who do support the projects. Park City Mountain Resort claims that a false narrative that new lifts increase traffic contributed to the appeals, which ties into the opposition to various developments, such as the Vail Town Council shutting down a housing project in favor of protecting bighorn sheep. Now, the residents need to understand that a huge portion of the economy in a ski town is tourists coming to visit, and that's what makes these ski areas successful. It's like moving to Orlando, which gets a ton of revenue from tourists going to Disneyland, and getting upset that people from out of town are coming over. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? I'm going to be a little bit subjective But the resort's claim that chairlift tourism does not exist is just flat out silly. There are chairlifts at many adventure parks. Look at Anakista, Glenwood Caverns, Oakland Zoo, and several others. Do any of these lifts involve skiing? No. Even the lifts that are used for the winter are heavily used in the summer too. Look at Peak to Peak at Whistler Blackcomb. And Park City uses their payday lift in the summer for the Alpine Slide. Chairlift tourism exists. It is how resorts make money. Another thing is that I feel the Planning Commission gave an inch and then the resort took a mile. What I mean is that Park City did two small projects in 2018 and in 2019. One was to enhance the beginner experience, that being the High Meadow Express, and the other to relieve crowd flow from the overly congested Tombstone area. Even though Over and Out wasn't on the master plan, it was a necessary build to manage the crowd flow so that skiers would at least have a way out of Tombstone. Fast forward to 2021, and Park City Mountain Resort / Vail Resorts decided to go huge, take a mile, without input from neighbors or the commission. This surprised residents, but not in a good way, as the ski days last year were more crowded than prior seasons, and locals just couldn't handle the traffic. That's where the appeals came in at the end of the season. Now that the big picture is laid out, how should Park City Mountain fix this issue? First off, should these two new lifts be built in the future? Yes. But if the Planning Commission wants the resort to have an adequate parking system before they build the new lifts, they should focus on that. If the main issue is parking, and the resort needs to expand parking but doesn't have enough room, here are some possible options for them. Option 1. Build a multi-level parking garage. If flat lots aren't enough, the resort could build a parking garage that would accommodate overflow traffic should the main lots fill up. However, some neighboring residents wouldn't necessarily want to see a tall parking garage from their homes, so the resort will have to seek input from residents as well as bringing it before the Planning Commission. Option 2. If the parking garage doesn't work, build another parking lot separate from the resort with a bus system to transport guests, similar to the Little Cottonwood Canyon setup. This would be basically a satellite parking lot. Again, the resort would have to get input from residents and the Planning Commission. Option 2A. Reserve the main parking lot for cars carrying 4 or more people. This would not only reduce parking lot fill-up, but would incentivize people to carpool in larger groups. Should cars have fewer than 4 people, that's where the satellite parking comes into play. Other than addressing parking, how else should Park City manage capacity? There are several ways they can do this. They could have a reservation system, like during COVID, where visitors will be required to have a reservation to ski, regardless if they have a season pass or not. In addition, the resort could restrict same-day ticket sales. Like, you can't just walk up to a ticket window the day of and be able to ski. Another potential solution would be virtual queuing, where visitors sign up for a time slot for a specific lift, and they could ski a few runs before going to that lift for their time slot. One example of this is Steamboat's virtual gondola line, which was implemented in 2020-21. Guests would sign up for a specific time and would get notified when it is time for them to ride the gondola. This way, they won't be stuck waiting in a physical line for hours. Another thing they could do is only allow season pass holder access on certain weekends, such as MLK or President's Day. In this case, Park City would prioritize people with single resort passes and not allow Epic pass holders on the busiest weekends. This would allow locals to enjoy the resort without worrying about huge crowds. This is not necessarily related to Park City Mountain Resort, but next door neighbor Deer Valley got approval from the same commission to replace Burns with a high-speed quad. Here's what Deer Valley did differently. Deer Valley implemented a plan to reduce capacity at the beginner base by having only the Snowflake Double access the new Burns lift. They will do this by extending the bottom of Snowflake down to the village, so the max capacity out of the beginner base will be 1,000 people per hour. Therefore, parking will not be a problem because there won't be an increase in demand since the beginner base will only output a smaller number of people than the new Burns lift. Additionally, Deer Valley decreased Icon Pass access and has controlled their crowds because of the 7-day limit for pass holders. To wrap up this video, let me ask you a question. If you were Vail Resorts / Park City Mountain and you wanted to increase capacity in a certain area, what would you have done differently? Now, I am no expert at this topic, but I have done a lot of reading and research on the Park City lift expansion plan. There are probably similar lift projects out there that have or have had similar issues like the Park City ones. Share all of your thoughts in the comments, and also let me know if the decision made sense or if Park City's new lifts should have been built. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a fantastic day. Until next time.